YouTube, what's going on? Welcome to the Off the Schneid 2020 NFL Preview Series, where I'll be going over all 32 NFL teams, breaking down their rosters, their schedule, giving you a record prediction, as well as helping out with some betting tips. If this is your first time at the channel, do me a massive favor, hit that like and subscribe button, turn on notifications, and check the description for links to social media for Off the Schneid. Follow us on there as well. I want to give a massive shout out to OurLads Scouting Services and OurLads.com for helping me to make these videos. I'm on their website almost daily, and if you're a serious football fan, guys, you need to have this website bookmarked, favorited, whatever it is. Helps me at draft time, fantasy football purposes, when creating bet slips, as well as DFS lineups. It's your one-stop shop for NFL scouting services. There's a link in the description for OurLads.com as well as the social media. Do me a favor again, hit that like and subscribe button. But enough of that, let's get to your favorite NFL football preview. Taking a look at the Houston Texans, we'll start it off as always with quarterback, most important position of football. We got Shaun Watson heading into his fourth season, and he's looking, for me, I did my quarterback rankings and left him out of my top 10, which was the most controversial pick on that top 10 in my opinion, and I'll likely get him in that top 10 for sure when I redo my rankings a little closer to this season. I definitely think that he is a top 10 caliber quarterback, but when I put together those rankings, they had traded Nuke and hadn't done anything at the time to kind of replace him. So but what they've done a pretty good job at replacing him, which I'll get to. But Shaun Watson, yeah, he's a very, very, very good quarterback in my opinion. It's just a matter of the pieces around him. He scrambles just enough. I wouldn't call Watson a running quarterback, but he scrambles and runs just enough to keep defenses honest. You have to be very honest, and you have to have someone keeping an eye on him. 269 yards in his rookie year in limited action, 550 yards, 413 yards with 5 touchdowns and 7 last year. So he can definitely scramble and get in the end zone on his feet, or with his legs, I should say. And he's progressed every year as a starting quarterback, in my opinion. So very good quarterback, and that's a very good start for this offense and for the team in general. So we'll move up to, might as well go to the wide receivers. They traded Nuke. Obviously, there was something between Bill O'Brien and DeAndre Hopkins that just wasn't connecting. They weren't meshing. It happens. I most certainly would have never traded Nuke Hopkins. I think he's, if not the best, he's 100% a top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. I mean, depends on his circumstances, obviously. In Houston, I would have him as a top 3. In Arizona, I don't have him in my top 3. I don't think you can right this second. We'll see how that plays out. But they went out and traded for Brandon Cooks and signed Randall Cobb, which are very good replacements. But this is where they paid Randall Cobb, I think it was $27 million over 3 years. I honestly don't see him getting onto the field a ton. I really don't. The Texans run a ton of 2 tight end sets, 1 running back, and Deshaun Watson out there finding receivers or running the ball type of thing. So with Brandon Cooks and Kenny Stills, I definitely like those 2 guys, and Will Fuller as well. It's just a matter of time before Will Fuller and Kiki Cutie most likely get hurt. It's happened every year for both of them. And it's kind of a matter of time, but they did a good job of replacing Hopkins as best they could. Obviously, you can't really replace a guy like that, a top tier receiver like that, but they've done a decent job, is what I keep going back to. People really hate on the trade, and so do I, but they did a decent job at replacing that production and filling out their roster. I could argue with you that their receiving core is better than last year. I can make that argument, and yeah, they've done a decent job, but I just don't see Randall Cobb getting on the field a ton, and I definitely see his stats regressing. The Cowboys ran a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, a lot. Obviously, he had 800 plus yards as a slot receiver with the Cowboys. I just do not see that happening with the Texans at all. I do like Brandon Cooks and Kenny Stills. I think Brandon Cooks could definitely get back to being a 1,000-yard receiver, 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns, something like that, maybe more. He might be able to break more touchdowns the way Will Fuller does in his limited action. Just burn it down the field, 4.3 speed, burn it down the field, catch the ball in the end zone. So I definitely like Brandon Cooks this year. But again, with Randall Cobb, I just don't see him being on the field a ton. I really don't, unless they change everything up, which is very possible, unless they start running a lot more 3 wide receiver sets. We'll see. But for me, the biggest problem with this team is definitely the offensive line. They were in the bottom 10 of sacks allowed. They allowed 49 sacks last year. And if you have kind of a scrambling quarterback like that and you're giving up that many sacks, that's not a good sign. It's really not. They should be improved. I'll say that they should be improved. Laramie Tunsil is becoming one of the better left tackles in the game. Max Sharping should improve. Titus Howard should improve. But realistically, if they get an injury on that offensive line, 1 or 2, it's going to be in a really bad place. They didn't really address it in the draft. They grabbed Charlie Heck, sure, decent pick, but I don't think he's going to make a huge difference right away. So if they face an injury or 2, it's going to make a bad situation worse for that team and that offense, and for Deshaun Watson. So I would have liked to have seen them do a little more in the draft to address that, and maybe free agency. Maybe I'm not exactly sure off the top of my head what their cap situation looks like, but they needed to address it a little better than they did, in my opinion. Tight ends are okay. Darren Fells and Jordan Akins had decent years, and Jordan Thomas is still improving, so I don't mind their tight ends at all. Running back is obviously an interesting one. They don't have that pound between the tackles running back like Carlos Hyde was for them last year, 1,000-yard rusher as well. But David Johnson and Duke Johnson should be capable pass catchers for sure. So here's the thing, which goes to the Randall Cobb point again. They could potentially run a couple of 2 running back sets that are both kind of pass catching out of the backfield. You could see a bunch of that. Definitely opens up that possibility. And we obviously have no idea what David Johnson's health kind of looks like. Is he ever going to get back to being that workhorse back? I don't think so. I really don't. He's 28 years old, and at this point in his career, he had a ridiculous amount of carries in college, and that not always, but most of the time that translates into a shorter NFL career. It just does for running backs. When you take that much of a pounding in college, it doesn't matter that they're lesser, players and lesser opponents and all that kind of stuff. You're taking hits. You're taking huge hits week in and week out in college. And for the amount of touches that he had in college, it's translating into a short NFL career. It just is. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. The offense looks like it's in an okay place, except for the offensive line, which concerns me. But they should still be able to put up points. The thing is, they're 1 play away from a touchdown almost always, with the speed they have and the arm of Deshaun Watson. They're 1 play away from a touchdown. So they've kind of tried to build the offense to keep up with the Chiefs, but good luck with that. Pop over the defensive side of the ball. This is another huge issue for me. Huge issue. They were bottom 5 in the NFL in getting after the quarterback. They had only 31 sacks last year. And that just can't continue. Again, they didn't make the necessary moves in the draft or in the offseason to help that defense. They do still have JJ Watt, but again, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to say anything bad about JJ Watt. I've got a JJ Watt Funko on my desk here. He's one of my favorite NFL players, but he always gets hurt. He's gonna get hurt. It's gonna happen. It might almost be time for him to hang him up. Honestly, if you can't stay on the field, the best ability is availability sometimes. And if you can't stay on the field, it might be time to hang it up. He's taken a lot of hits. He's had already a Hall of Fame career, much like Luke Kuechly. There'd be no shame if JJ Watt retires this after this year or at any point. There's no shame in that at all. But he's the only guy, him and Whitney Merciless, they're really the only guys that are getting after the quarterback. I do like the Jonathan Grenard draft pick. I was a little tough on it at the time because I thought there was a couple better options to do the similar things. But I don't mind that pick at all. And I think he'll make a difference. And I think he's got a chance to start. OurLads has him third string right now, but I think he has a good chance to be a starter in this defense and should make a difference to get after the quarterback because they need more help. When JJ Watt and Whitney Merciless, for that matter, were putting up those numbers, Jadeveon Clowney was in town and he's gone. And they just lost DJ Reader, who wasn't getting after the quarterback, but it definitely helps. Ross Blacklock should be able to fill in there. I love that pick. That was the only thing that saved them from getting an F grade for me, was the Ross Blacklock pick. But again, they need to get after the quarterback and they need to protect theirs. If I'm building I've said this before and I'll say it every time. If I'm building an NFL team, I'm starting with the lines, offensive and defensive lines, and I work back. And quarterback, that's different. But every other position, I'm starting at the lines and I'm working back. And they are the two places of major weakness on this team. We'll see, but that's my opinion on it. And their linebackers are okay. Zach Cunningham I believe out of Connecticut. UConn is where he went to school, I believe. Nope, Vanderbilt. But I do like Zach Cunningham and Bernardrick McKinney. Like they're okay compliments. There's nothing wrong with these guys, but they need to get after the quarterback and help them out, especially because I see their back end as being another weakness. I don't mind Vernon Hargreaves as a kind of a nickel corner. I don't mind that at all. But and Bradley Roby, like he has been good throughout his career. He's definitely getting a little bit up there in age. He still should be fine, 28 years old. And then Gary Connolly, former first round pick. I don't Lonnie Johnson, he's okay. Like I don't hate these guys, but I'm not in love with any of them either. They paid a bunch of money to Eric Murray, who's never really been a starter in the league, not a consistent one, but he's only 26 years old, and I'm okay with spending that money if you're right. You need to be right because they're paying him a lot of money. So you better be right that Eric Murray is the guy, and he is going to be the solution at safety. Justin Reed is okay. I don't hate Justin Reed either, but that's the point. This whole defense is just mediocre. The whole defense is mediocre, and mediocre doesn't win a lot of football games. It just doesn't. So we'll see, but I don't mind this team. I don't mind it, but it seems like they're just always in the same position. They're always close, you know, and that's kind of Bill O'Brien for me. I personally do not like Bill O'Brien as a head coach or running a football team. Clearly, as he's basically general manager, head coach, be all end all. He decides everything with the Houston Texans. I'm not a massive fan of Bill O'Brien. I'm really not. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. They've won the division, I think, the past 2 years in a row. I believe that changes this year. So with that, let's pop over, take a look at their schedule, and take a look at my prediction for their record. All right, so you can see it there, low, high, my. They play the AFC North and the NFC North this year. 4.2 to win the division on your money. That's the third highest, obviously. And they won the division the past 2 years. If I recall off the top of my head, I'm not looking at it, but off the top of my head, I believe they've won the division the past 2 years. So, it's my low and high. That's a spread. That's a huge spread. One wins the division, and one you're picking probably top 10 next year in the draft. So I honestly think I might have been a little generous with 8-8. To be honest with you, I could see 7-9. Closer to the 6-10 than to 11-5 for sure. That's my prediction. If we look at the schedule, Chiefs, Ravens, Steelers at Steelers. If this was in Houston, I give them a much, much, much better chance at winning that game. But there's a they're not beating the Chiefs. They're not beating the Ravens. I don't care where the games are taking place. They're not beating either of those teams. So they're starting 0-2 almost for sure. And then at the Steelers, even if Ben Roethlisberger isn't playing or he gets hurt or he's not where a lot of people think he's going to be, like I do, I still think the Steelers have a very good chance to win that game. So it's not inconceivable at all to say the Houston Texans start 0-3. And if they start 0-3, that's mentality wise, that's not a good spot. That's not where you want to be. Obviously, no team wants to start 0-3. I think if you're 0-3, your chances of making the playoffs is slim to none. I'm not sure what the numbers are exactly, but if you start 0-3, very good chance you are not making the playoffs. So that's kind of where I went with my prediction, and that's honestly why I think 8-8 is actually generous. Just those first 3 games are very, very tough. Then at home against Minnesota, that's a game that they're going to have to win. They're going to have to win that game at home. And that's a tough game. That's going to be a tough game for sure. The only reason I give them a decent shot at winning that game is the corners in Minnesota are all basically rookies. The starters are going to be rookies. So Shaun Watson has to be able to take advantage of that. And Cooks and Stills and potentially Cobb and Fuller, they have to take advantage of those rookie corners. And they have to win that game. And then at home against Jacksonville, again, that's another, you have to win that game. You absolutely have to. If they lose either of those 2 games, their season is over. It is over. So you have to win those 2 games. And then on the road against Tennessee, that's going to be a tough one. It's a winnable game. I think it's a winnable game. I think the Titans are going to regress. I think they're going to have a tougher time winning games this year. I think people might get Tannehill figured out, but we'll see how that goes. And they should be able to throw the ball against the Titans, I think that's going to be their offense. I think they're going to be kind of a shootout type of team, run and gun. Shaun Watson throwing the ball 30 plus times a game, every game. But we'll see. So that's a winnable game. If they win, if they go 0-3 or even 2-1, and then they win the next 2 games against Minnesota and Jacksonville, that's a game that they could kind of sacrifice. They don't absolutely have to win that game, but it's still, if they start 0-3 and they go, then they're 2-3, that's almost a must-win game, because at home against Green Bay, I think that's a loss. I think Green Bay is going to win that game. I think they're going to run the ball down their throat with their 3-headed backfield and A-Rod. There you go. That's another one. That's it. That's all I need to say. They go on the bye week 8. It's a good spot for this team. They're kind of a bit of a veteran team. That's an okay time for them to take their bye. And then they come back with 2 games on the road. At Jacksonville, you have to win these games. You have to. That's a team that you have to beat, even if it's on the road. Any team that plays a team like Jacksonville this year, even if it's in Jacksonville, they have to win that game if you want to be a playoff team. You just have to. At Cleveland, I don't think they win that game. Cleveland Browns win that game. At home against New England, they'll get that win, I believe. At Detroit, that might be a tough one. It's hard to say where Detroit's going to be, especially at that point in the season, but that's going to be a tough game either way. At home against Indy, if I'm the Texans, I'd rather play Indianapolis earlier in the season. I would much rather play them earlier in the season. So to play Indy this late in weeks 13 and 15, I don't think that that's conducive for the Texans making a playoff run or winning the division. I really don't. I think the Colts are going to be a much improved team this year, and I think they're going to be better than the Texans. So I think it's pretty conceivable they lose both those games against the Colts. Especially in Indianapolis. I think they will lose that game for sure. They have to win. They have to split with them. If they will lose that first game at home against Indy, game over. At Chicago, tough game. Chicago in December, that's a tough game. They're an indoor team. They're going to an outdoor field in a cold city. That's a tough game. Again, at Indy, don't think they're winning that. At home against the Bengals, my Bengals, They should get that win. Again, that's a team you have to beat. You have to beat this team. If it's on the road, you have to beat my Bengals. You have to. And I give them a pretty good shot, but it depends on how their season's going. If they're closer to that 6-10 or less mark, they might be kind of mentally thrown in the towel. And the Bengals are an up and coming team. They're going to be playing hard every game no matter what. And I'm not saying the Texans wouldn't. I expect that they most certainly would. But you never know. At that point in the season, that's a good spot for the Bengals to play the Texans, to be honest with you. And then the final game, week 17, at home against the Titans. So those last 2 games are really going to depend on how the Texans season has gone. And if I'm being honest, I don't see it going well. I really don't. If you start the season 0-3, which is extremely, very possible and almost likely, that's a tough spot to dig yourself out of that hole. It's a really tough spot, you know. It kind of breaks them a little bit mentally. And again, like I said, the stats say if you start 0-3, even 0-2, your possibility of going to the playoffs is extremely diminished. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see. And I might take some heat from Texans fans here, but I personally will not be picking the Texans to win this division. I don't believe, unless something changes. As of right this second, I will not be picking the Texans to win this division again. I just don't believe in Bill O'Brien at all. And I think their team is just mediocre in a lot of places where it needs to be better. So we'll see what happens, but there's your breakdown for the Houston Texans.